Good afternoon, guys. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Portland, Oregon, and John's coming back over again, but this time on his BMW 5. Hiya, John. Wow, that was quiet. I never heard you coming, actually. I've been waiting with my ears wide open.
No, that's not the same kind of sound at all.
No. Very cool, John. Nice to see you again.
Oh,
yeah, very good.
Glad to come by. It's a beautiful day for a ride.
Thank you. Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's quite warm, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Not if you're moving.
No, yeah, that's the spirit. Well, I see you've replaced the tank. You changed the tank then?
I put the toaster tank on.
That's the toaster tank then, the infamous toaster tank.
I wonder how it got that name.
Huh? Yeah. I'm expecting something to pop up. I could do with a nice slice of toast right now. Some marmalade. That would be very nice.
Oh, we'd have to look. I don't think
It's a really nice looking bike, is that, isn't it?
Oh, I think it's real pretty. I've owned it just a year. I was looking, I bought it the first week of July last year. So I've had it just a year, and it makes me think of it when you say it's a pretty bike, because Connie went with me when we went to look at it, because it was owned by a fellow down in Eugene. And when she saw it, she said, "Oh, that's pretty." I bought it from Joe Kunkel in Eugene. It's a 1973 R75/5 long wheelbase. That's a distinction they make. They lengthen the wheelbase about 2 inches on some of the bikes in 73, and then I think all of the bikes after that. But Joe said that when he bought the bike in 1983, he had his wife with him. And she said, "Oh, that's pretty."
That's the secret. That's the secret going forward, right? We should all learn from that.
The bike has 143,000 miles on it. And Joe put most of those on. When he bought the bike, I think it had 13,000 miles on it. It was 10 years old. He rode it all over the country, and a lot of that two-up. He rode it with a fairing for a good part of that time and on his longer trips. I bought it from him last July, and it came with 3 different fairings, 3 sets of handlebars. This is the medium, but it came with a short cafe set and a taller set. And the fairings, one is a big frame-mounted fairing called a pop dryer. A fellow in Indiana who was apparently famous for building fairings back in the 60s and 70s. But then 2 smaller handlebar-mounted fairings as well. It came with these custom mufflers, which are stainless steel, made by a fellow here in Portland by the name of Tom Webb. And but he also gave me the stock mufflers that he had. It's been interesting to learn a little bit more, because it's all the interconnected stories of these different people. Because I've ridden at places and had somebody come up and say, "Oh, those are Tom Webb mufflers." As it was a known, recognized local specialist. It also has this is not a stock seat. This is a custom seat made by Don Weber, Mr. Ed's Moto, yes, down in Albany, who has a national reputation for building custom seats for people. But I don't know whether Joe had it done or if it was already done when he bought it, but it's a very comfortable seat. I've had a few of the BMW purists look sideways at it, but it's a very, very comfortable seat. When I started asking about him, then, oh yes, I mean, people ride their motorcycles across the country to come to his shop and be custom fitted for their custom seat. With 143,000 miles on it, I think it had 13,000 on it when Joe bought it. He rode it all over the country, put 110, 120,000 miles on it. I've just reached 3,000 miles that I've put on it since I bought it a year ago. So I've been riding it quite a bit and really enjoy it. It's very different from the Triumph from the BSA. But out on the highway, it's just great. I mean, I enjoy riding it through, just up on Skyline through the curves and so on too. But it's not the sport bike that the Triumph and the BSA are. but it's got plenty of power. It's got plenty of go. But if you're familiar with the BMW transmission, it's got a much slower, kind of deliberate shift to it. I've seen pictures of them on racetracks, but I'm not sure just, you know, they have to allow for that lost second between gears. It also came with 2 gas tanks. This one it's commonly referred to as the toaster tank. You know, it looks like the chrome toasters of the 1960s that were in the house that I grew up in. But I've also got the larger black tank. This one holds 4.5 gallons. I think the large one is a little over 6 gallons. And so it gives you a little more range if you're out on the highway. And Joe told me he had the black one on it most of its life. The luggage is original. These locking panniers, which I find to be very convenient. I've never had that on a bike in the past, but you know, I keep my rain suit and a spare inner tube in there, and it's easy to put your lunch in there without having to strap a sandwich down with a bungee cord on your back seat and eating a mashed piece of bread later. And Joe gave it to me with the original toolkit. In fact, with an original shop rag with the BMW logo on it that came with it. And I got the workshop manual, the owner's manual, and a parts catalog that he had. But there are good resources online for parts. I mean, there are a few things that aren't available anymore. I mean, you can't buy an original toaster tank anymore, but you could buy the side panels, you can buy the emblem. I've had to do very little to it. I put new tires on it, put new battery in it, new hand grips. I had Steve Prokop in Dundee look it over as well at his BMW shop, and he replaced the seals and the bumpers in the front forks. But otherwise said things looked pretty good to him. Another part of the story about Joe Kunkel in Eugene, he was not an enthusiastic mechanic, but he was a close friend to Chuck Murphy, who owns Murph's BMW service in Eugene. And all of the work while Joe owned the bike was done by Murph in his shop. And Joe worked out a deal with him that he paid for parts and he traded for labor. He was Murph's break-in rider. Because Murph is such a persnickety mechanic that he would not give an engine rebuild back to the owner until it had been ridden at least 50 miles. You know, so the first break-in miles had to be done before he would give it back to the owner. And Joe was his rider to do his break-in miles on all of his bikes. That was the trade he would make to have Murph work on the bike for him. Just all the stories that came with the bike are part of what makes it fun.
Are you planning on doing some touring then on this sometime?
The longest ride I've done so far was the Airhead camp out in Maupin, Oregon last September. You know, that was a 500-mile weekend, 3 days, you know, to and fro and riding out there. I did 200 miles on a day a couple weeks ago. We rode down to Detroit Lake and back. That was like 210 miles or so for the day. But yeah, I was hoping to take it up to Vashon Island for the event this fall, but that's been canceled at this point. I'm tempted, you know, the thoughts in my mind, I haven't figured out when yet, that I have a son and his family in Missoula, Montana. That would be a very nice 2-day ride from here. That I'd like to ride it up there when the weather's good and we're free to travel more.
I like those side panels. Very much
Yeah.
the chrome, they match perfectly with the gas tank.
Yep, those are often missing. They have a tendency to wander off.
Yes.
It's kind of funny, they're on both sides, but they're held on by a rubber band that goes from one to the other.
Is that right?
And so if your rubber band breaks, they both exit. You go on the BMW sites, there's certain tips, you know, zip tie that side panel on some way. Actually, it's funny, these straps around the luggage are also another common addition because these panniers have a tendency to go their own way at times, apparently. I haven't tested that. I took their word for it. But actually, I wanted to show you that the service manual with all of Joe's notes in it.
Absolutely.
So there's notes starting from when he purchased it in 1983 with 13,300 miles on it. So there's that.
Oh
Then
my gosh.
Continuing on through
Oh, that's an
all the-
attention to detail right
the
there.
major work that's been done to it.
Oh my goodness.
And then the last entry was in August 2015. And he recorded the mileage, and it only had like 340 miles more than that on it when I bought it. in 2019. So 4 years later, he'd only ridden it another 340 miles. But he had 2 more motorcycles.
Yes.
He had a new BMW, and he had a big Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
So he just wasn't riding it much anymore, and that's why he said he was selling it. For me, what's interesting is the comparison to the Triumph Bonneville and the BSA Lightning. That it's not the quick, snap your neck kind of acceleration on it, but at the same time, you get on a freeway on-ramp, and I'm sure it could keep up. It's got another 100 cc's over those bikes. It really goes. I'm trying to think of the year. It would have been an earlier BMW, but when I first started college, one of my engineering professors rode a BMW. And it was the first one I'd ever seen. This was in the middle of Iowa in the late 60s. They weren't, it wasn't something you saw every day, but he had this black BMW that he rode to campus any time there was nice weather, and every summer he took a long trip on it. I wasn't on campus, I was working in town in the summer, and seeing him go by with the luggage and stuff on the back of it as he was headed out of town at for his summer trip one year. That was my first impression of BMWs, and it was consistent with the long-term story.
All right, take care, John.